Hi there. Home time is by far and away my favourite time of the day. But apart from bringing to mind the joy of the end of the working day, it's also a way of framing the way in which we construct our identity and identities, or sense of housing self, across space, place, and time, often through reference to others, and then use that sense to navigate our housing pathways. Home time can take on increased significance in later life, as the housing decisions we make can directly impact our health, well-being and happiness at its most complex of life stages. So in this paper, I'll be examining some of the ways in which home time functions in later life housing pathways. I'll be focusing on the interactions between times, selves and others. Firstly, in terms of the presence of others within the context of a specific identity shift over time, and then going on to explore the role of the absence of others in home time planning. I sometimes see the later life housing pathway as the part of the motorway that you might want to try and avoid, where various lanes merge and cross over, with numerous potential exits, many of them badly signposted. You hit the motorway at 65 and then have to rapidly get used to new driving conditions, possibly with poor visibility. As a starting point, it might be good to define what I actually mean by later life housing, as one of the confusing aspects is the amount of names used. For this paper, I'll be using these definitions. Later life housing refers to all housing which has an age criteria attached to it. Then we have what I'll call age exclusive or exclusive, otherwise known as sheltered, retirement, warden controlled, ILC. Then we have integrated age exclusive, also called extra care, SHEC, ILC with care. There are a number of shared characteristics, telecare, manager or warden, age criteria, and some variants. Alongside this, I'll also use general needs to refer to all housing that doesn't have an age or care criteria attached to it. Throughout this paper, I'll use a number of quotes from participants, which I'll read out. This paper draws on my PhD research into later life housing decision making, for which I carried out 53 interviews, 15 with practitioners and 38 with people aged between 65 and 99, living in a range of housing types. The research took place in York, a city in northern England with a population of nearly 203,000 people. A reflexive thematic analysis approach was used to code, analyse and make meaning from the data. The interviews were semi-structured, using active interview principles, and the research deploys Clapham's housing pathway model to try and understand the interplay between meaning, identity and construction as people navigate the unique challenges of later life. Or, to put it another way, when they come off the life course slip road, put their foot down and go like the Claphams. So what do we mean by home time? For me, it's a way of capturing the interaction of multiple identities, both selves and others, clustered and congealed around space and place, shaped and stretched by time. If we see many housing decisions as being driven by a desire to enact agency, to, as Galland puts it, not have to behave in personably objectionable ways, to try and avoid badness, then they're often shaped by our attempts to forecast, to imagine future selves in future spaces and places, to construe which pathway, which motorway exit is most likely to take us to the best place. Because, as Wilson and Gilbert argue, what people really want to know about the future is what their level of happiness and well-being will be. To try and both predict the happiness of their future housing selves and situate themselves within their current and future housing pathways, people pull at the various strands of time, casting backwards and forwards to create a multidimensional roadmap of varying degrees of accuracy. But map making isn't a solitary activity. To gain a sense of scale, to pinpoint landmarks, to make contours relative, people use others, both the presence and absence of, as points of reference. Others become the theodolites of motorway map construction, sometimes assisting free flow, sometimes coning sections off. The range of others is wide: parents, children, professionals, neighbours, grandparents, friends, colleagues, and in one case, guinea pigs. Of these, one of the most interesting and perhaps least understood is that of age group peers. And peers are used in a variety of ways in the narratives of people in later life. They can be used to create a bridge to a future self, to justify past choices, as a cautionary tale, as an ideal, and as an idiot's guide. One of their primary roles is as an aid to forecasting. Proxy experience is used to create various notional home times, like building a range of dolls' houses of various shapes and sizes and engaging in some imaginary play. The role of peers, often in the guise of friends, appears to be particularly strong in relation to relocation to age-exclusive housing, a process which also sees shifts in selves over time. Of the 38 people in later life, 19 were living in a form of later life housing, exclusive, integrated or almshouses. The majority of these relocated after the age of 65. They were mostly women, most had no formal care needs, most lived alone, and they spanned a whole age range of 65 to 99. The majority were living in private exclusive developments, either as owner-occupiers or private renters. 6 out of the 12 who'd relocated to exclusive had a connection with somebody who already lived in that specific development, and in one case that chain had more than one link. Clara moved in knowing friends, and then John later moved in as he knew Clara. The vast majority of participants living in exclusive made it really clear to me that they were not looking for an exclusive property initially. They were looking for a property, and it happened to be an exclusive development. At the same time, the vast majority of people living in exclusive made it really clear to me that they would choose this model again if their flat was destroyed in a notional Wizard of Oz style tornado, and that they'd highly recommend it to friends. It therefore seems something is happening between the pre-contemplation, contemplation and action stages when relocating to exclusive, whereby there's a shift in the housing self over time, which results in the possible construction of a new, communal, exclusive positive identity. In narrating their relocation pathways, most participants' initial focus was on general needs, and they often spoke of not knowing anything about exclusive at that stage or dismissing it as not for them. The tools they used for the search were general needs focused, property search websites, estate agents' windows. At this stage, exclusives often viewed quite negatively. One participant started off by telling people she was moving to an old people's home. Charlotte's daughter warned her she'd get old before her time if she moved in. Another's friend imagined she was moving into a poky little flat. At some point, they become aware of an exclusive property that fits their requirements. Price, location, security, a lift. They're interested in the flat despite, not because of the fact that it's an exclusive development. They aren't interested in any of the features that differentiate it from general needs. The on-site housing manager, the telecare provision, the communal areas. In fact, the opposite was sometimes asserted, that they moved in despite of, not because of these features. It seems at this stage that the housing self, both at the time of action and of retelling, is creating a form of acceptable narrative, recasting exclusive for them as a general needs property that happens to be an exclusive development. By constructing a version of exclusive that's as far removed from the institution as possible, they're creating a buffer, a rubber ring that enables them to swim as close as possible to the mainstream. Peers are also deployed here to create a bridge of tolerability between the current and future housing selves. Here the proxy acts as a mirror of competence, a body in the building that is not falling down. If the negative perceptions of exclusive may frame it as being one foot in the grave, a place that'll make you old, somewhere that's pokey, an old people's home, then being able to directly compare yourself and your abilities with a peer already in residence and find them congruent can be very reassuring. This is really well captured by Hazel's description of her friend Adam, who was already living in the development she stumbled across in her otherwise general needs-focused property search. And she said, "It was very comforting to know that Adam was here because I knew he wasn't disabled or mentally incapable. He was fine. If he was fine and he's similar to her, then she might also be fine, even if others were not. Adam becomes the possible exception that disproves the rule. It can't be an old people's home if he lives there because he doesn't display old people's home resident characteristics." Peers can also act as an insider in the building, allowing people access to the physical space without the mediation of estate agents, who are roundly hated, or managers, who are roundly dismissed. This ability to see, to spend time in space, is seen as a great positive in decision-making, and for one participant it was revelatory, as I was shown, I wasn't just told it, I actually saw it. Having built an acceptable bridge to get them over the divide, they move in, and then may begin the next phase where they assimilate and begin to confound expectations, both their own and others, finding features of exclusive more positive than they predicted. Whereas before I was the self and they were those who lived in exclusive for exclusive's sake, which may also include friends, There is a pivot to a we, an accepted member of the community. The community then becomes a very strong perceived advantage of living in exclusive and a primary benefit of the relocation and retelling. A more challenging aspect of this community identity development is that we sometimes becomes defined in opposition to them, and membership of the two groups comes to rest on an assessment of fit, often defined in terms of health and care needs. While we are careless and carefree and able to stay put, they are careful, too far gone for exclusive. In terms of an explanation for this identity shift of a relocation and time, a powerful factor is the perception of exclusive housing in the popular imagination. While novels such as Richard Osman's Thursday Night Murder Club series have changed the image, there's still a very significant amount of confusion and misconception, with 1 in 3 people in the UK believing that retirement living is the same as an old people's home. At the same time, the old people's home is viewed almost entirely negatively, with more than 80% of people over 75 stating they did not want to live in residential care. If people believe that exclusive is even vaguely similar to a care home, or represents a step on the pathway to the care institution, the impact on forecasting may be significant. Such is the fear of the institution, the overwhelming negativity attached to it, that it's little wonder that bodies displaying care needs become a site of fear to be avoided. Out of sight is out of mind. This means that the doll's house of exclusive that people construct and place their future selves into to see how it might feel is often fatally flawed. There's no way for their current and future selves to fit, so in order to make things more comfortable, they recast the move as actually being a move to general needs, like a wolf in sheep's cladding. Home time here is a process of temporal realignment, a housing narrative written and rewritten to reflect the shift of the housing self. After peers, perhaps the strongest form of other in home time was that of partners, and they broadly function in 3 ways. Firstly, the impact of partners who are present on current and future pathways, then the impact of partners who are now absent, and the construction of pathways based on future absences. And it's this third type that I'll now discuss in more depth. If we see the exclusive pivot as being an example of the impact of persons here present, these pathways are based on the imagined future impact of persons to be absent. They occur when a person constructs an imagined future housing self that will come into being only when there's a shift in the household makeup, generally through death or relationship breakdown. I've called these advanced direction pathways. To continue the motorway metaphor, while navigating the tricky road conditions, hurtling at speed towards an unclear end destination, drivers also have to contend with something flickering in the rear view. This is the shadow of change and potential loss, and to try and avoid this, the driver might ignore what's in the mirror altogether. I interviewed a number of couples for this research, along with people with partners, and a reported lack of discussion as to what will happen if the pathway shifts from joint to singular, from dual carriageway to single track, was striking. Similarly, most had not had a full discussion with their children as regards their future housing pathway wishes, relying instead on assumed understanding and tacit agreements. For some, advanced direction pathways represent a form of Plan B, a possibly preferable pathway that's not compatible with a joint housing identity, but which will be enacted if the joint becomes singular. Some participants, such as Fliss, currently living in a large house with her husband, had quite detailed and granular plans and intended to put them into action. She said, "I think life will continue as it is until he dies. If I die first, he'll stay. And if he dies first, I will, almost a day after the funeral, I'll have the for sale signs up." She's already identified the specific exclusive development she plans to move to, though she did stress that she wasn't actually waiting for her husband to die. This plan has not been overtly discussed with her husband. She knows that he will not under any circumstances sell their current house or consider a move to exclusive, so this is very much an individual pathway in waiting. These pathways can also be co-reasoned, as some participants had made housing plans with their partner for what would happen in the event of death. One thing that's clear from the narratives of those who have already lost partners and made subsequent changes to their housing pathway is that having engaged in home time planning with their partner before death has provided them with a great deal of comfort. This is clearly seen in Kate's narrative. She moved to an exclusive development after the loss of her husband, again not with the intention of moving to exclusive, but because of its location. Although the decision to relocate was made alone, she also feels it was a shared choice because they discussed it before he died. He would have supported the decision and probably made the same one for himself. Through dialogue, through casting forwards, they were able to create a continuation of a shared housing identity across time rather than a fracturing. She said, "I do believe that he's still with me, and I had a dream or it happened, but I came here on the Monday, and it was either the Thursday night or the Friday night, I turned over, looking towards the bedroom door, and the bedroom lit up, and his head came round and winked, then he waved. He's done his job. He's left me where I'm happy, and that's it." Advanced direction pathways can allow the surviving member of a couple, of a household, to embrace a decision that's no longer shared, but which has the stamp of co-reasoned approval. They can have confidence that they're not acting in a way which would have been personally objectionable to either their partner or their former joint identity, unless, of course, such oppositional behaviour was intended. This joint pathway also continues for Kate further across time, as she sees her final relocation as being to join her husband and their dogs, who've gone ahead to find a cottage for all of them. Home time here is a process of looking directly at the future, at selves and absences, and having the courage and the endurance to forecast the unthinkable in order to protect the future housing self. These are only two examples of the ways in which home time functions in later life decision making, but they point up the complex ways people use time, selves, and others to construct a veritable atlas of pathways, past, current, and future. It also highlights the potential to improve housing decision making through the intentional deployment of others, through more accurate forecasting, and through an active engagement with home time. And these have gone on to form a really interesting part of the research outputs. A few months ago, I held a series of dissemination events, bringing together interview participants from both cohorts to feedback my findings. We also reflected on how taking part in the research made people think and feel and act, and spoke about aids and barriers to decision making. There was a particular interest in the role of others in housing planning, and a real enthusiasm to explore the ways in which people in later life could use their own experience to help others, and to develop opportunities for peer and mutual support. We then went on to come up with some ideas and recommendations as to how we could help others make the best possible housing decisions. These ideas focused on three areas. Firstly, increasing awareness of and access to advice and information in a way that meets people's needs. Secondly, using people's own housing experiences to help and guide others. And finally, creating a space for people to think and talk about housing. These have formed the basis for a number of possible peer support-driven initiatives that will soon be taken to a co-productive later life forum, with the hope they'll be adopted as part of a local level, age-friendly policy action plan. The ideas being explored include using volunteers to have conversations about housing, matching people up who are interested in a particular housing type with someone who already lives there to have a discussion. An experience library, a collection of films, recordings or scrapbooks of people talking about their housing decisions. Housing cafes, along similar lines to death or menopause cafes. An informal get-together to talk about housing, hopes, plans, fears and worries. And a supportive community that can understand the issues and help people look at the future head-on. Peer support initiatives such as these would enable more people to access more proxy experiences and therefore build more dolls' houses. They would create a space for open debate, dialogue and discussion based on lived experience, enabling people to confront fears and to face those most difficult of conversations. Indeed, one of the most moving parts of the workshop was when Kate, who we met earlier, spoke about how she would urge others to talk about bereavement before it happens, but also about how taking part in the research and talking about her pathway with others has reassured her that she's made the right decisions. Home time matters because it's by scanning the horizon and the rear view, by looking over to who's in the next lane and what traffic is entering and exiting the motorway, that we make sense of where we've been and where we're going. Our housing pathways are unique, but they're also shared. They're negotiated with various selves at various times, and, as in most of life's endeavours, we're stronger and more effective if we work together, share experiences, and create space for debate, dialogue and discussion. We can't stop time, or ageing, or change, or loss. We can't stop the rain, but we can take an umbrella. Thank you very much.